Hello, awesome folks. I hope you're having an amazing day today. So normally on Fridays, I like to do my top some things in the films section. Last week I did my top 5 silents. Previously, I did my top 10 animated films. I've done my top 10 foreign language films, action films, comedies, sports, foreign language films, all those sorts of things recently. So I wanted to knock out something a little different that I thought you guys would appreciate, that is movie related but isn't sort of my top stuff and such. I thought you guys might enjoy this and so forth. So I've got 10 pages of notes on my cell phone. So if you see me looking down and giving it the eye contact, it's like I've spent like an hour and a half writing my script today and that sort of a thing. But if you get that idea of what's happening, so just a heads up, I have to look down. That's it. So basically what I wanted to do was to spend today talking about my struggles for finding good modern horror films, right? When I went back and did my top horror films from each of the couple decades and so forth, I had to stop at the 60s and 70s. In the 60s, I had tons of stuff for, right? But the 70s had much harder to come up with one or two, right? I had to generally liked enough. It was like thousands of films were released in the 70s. How come it was so hard for me to find like one or two that I thought were good, right? So what are like in a horror film? And then why are things not like them today? All right, and that sort of thing. So I want my horror films, right, to have a great sense of atmosphere and mood and build up that's over time to a great climax, right? Just like a great short story, just like a great person. They got great descriptions, they got great sets, they got great moods, they got great words. And they write and so forth. And so in my short stories and novels of horror, I want to build up over time, have this great atmosphere, and then a classic ending, right? And that sort of a thing. And I feel like, that's what I'm looking for, right, from a film, too. I just don't want cheaper things that are just riddled with jump scares, blood and gore, and shock value, right? I want a shift. There is a shift from this. For example, my top film that I mentioned from that section earlier was Night of the Living Dead, which is all about mood, atmosphere, right? And it's a classic. I feel like it's a classic moody piece that inspired and captured versus the zombie films that inspired and captured, which are much more about spectacle. And how far can I push the boundaries, right? I find this subject is particularly about pushing the boundaries in a lot of films, and particularly in those films, and that sort of a thing. All right, so what I'm going to do today for you folks, I thought it would be great to take 3 modern good films that I like a lot and 3 bad films and match them up to show them, to show why I don't like them much. So here are my 3 matchups. I try to do films that are released that are roughly the same era. So the first is Ghost Ship versus Predator. Predator, I couldn't find a bad film around that time, but that's one of my older films. I got House on Haunted Hill versus the Blair Witch Project from the same year. And then my favorite film, Let the Right One In, the modern era, versus and that is the Swedish film versus the Final Destination 1, and so forth. So of the 3 films I'm going to be picking, that one's loved by a lot of horror fans, and a lot of folks like the Final Destination has an entire series. Great, and that sort of a thing. I thought it'd be great to grab it. And that sort of thing. I thought it would be great to have that and so forth against my favorite modern horror film, Let the Right One In, and so forth. Because I thought it'd be great as a best of showing, since a lot of films liked it and made a lot of money at the theaters. All right, so after that, I'll look at 3 reasons why I feel modern horror films just aren't about the slower, greater mood and appreciation too, but are about doing light, spoiler-free reviews of these 6 films, just a heads up too. So if I've seen them all, I've only seen them all once, except for Blair, which I saw twice. All right, let's move on. For round number 1 is Ghost Ship versus Predator. Ghost Ship was made in 2003 by Steve Beck and starring Juliana Margulies and Ron Eldred. It has a Rotten Tomatoes review with critics, and I understand that Rotten Tomatoes is only a positive or minus. It's just a thumbs up or thumbs down. It doesn't really rate the mood. We'll be using that in Metacritic too. So that's 14% and fans at 37%, a little better, but it's still not that great. Metacritic is at 28% critics and 5.7 rating by fans, much better there. Not that bad by them at all. It's a tragedy here on this aforementioned Italian ship and so forth that we see in the early eras. It's a ship and it's now haunted. This film was all about blood and gore and sensationalism. In the first few scenes that don't make sense. There are no major character arcs, nothing here cares about atmosphere. It's all about just a cheap film, just for the thrills. It's a 0 out of 10 for my folks. Now versus Predator. This is from 1987 and it stars Arnold Schwarzenegger and by John McTiernan. This is a meetup of action, sci-fi, and horror, and so forth. It's about a U.S. special ops team that is against bad stuff, hunting them, and so forth in the jungle. This has blood and gore and stuff, and it is a creature feature, so I do consider a take on the horror genre. But it's done to build up that suspense, right, and atmosphere to that strong and level lots. All the blood, all the gore here help to flesh out what's happening, help to build the story. It's not just for sensationalism, right? So it's got Predator's got an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, and 87% from fans, great stuff. But on Metacritic, though, I'm surprised that critics are just 47%. Really surprised. If with an 80% heavy, that's a 4 out of 5 saying it's a good film. But really, their average is really not that great. I'm surprised by that. And then fans are at 8.5, right around the same they were previously. So it's a big split there. And so forth. It's a 10 out of 10 for my mind. See how blood and gore and such can grow the film if it's used to build the story, atmosphere, mood, great sets, and makeup and stuff like that. Hope so. Now round 2 is The House on Haunted Hill versus the Blair Witch Project from the same year. So from The House on Haunted Hill is a film directed by William Malone and then starring a big cast like Jeffrey Rush, Fam Kajan Sante, Diggs, and Ali Larder, among others. This is based on the Vincent Price film that was directed by William Castle of the same name that I loved a lot from that era, from the era. But they dialed it up to an 11 for the modern audiences. And so, for example, they instead of staying at a supposedly haunted house, they're now staying at an insane asylum where evil things happen and that sort of thing. They got to get a paycheck if they stay enough times and get that money and such. So this is stuff. They're saving a massive home asylum and the bad things that make them. This made bank. There's actually a sequel for it, right? Good stuff. So on Rotten Tomatoes, this has a 31% from critics, but a 42% from fans. And Metacritic, it's at 28 critics and 68 fans. So their fans are still liking it more and it made enough money for a sequel. It made good money. But it overuses, in my opinion, the scenery and sets and doesn't really do well with its premise. It's based on a good movie, a great movie. At least, it gets a 2 out of 10 for my takes. And sort of a thing. The Blair Witch Project is the next one from that year too. Directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, and starring Heather Donahue, Michael Williams, and Joshua Leonard. This film is all about the found footage of a group of young filmographers trying to find out that titular Blair Witch for you folks. It's at Rotten Tomatoes, 86% by critics, but just 57% of fans like it, which I think is a little weird, considering how popular it was and how much money it made. And with a Metacritic of 80. That shows that it's not just critics that like that on things, but with like a 50% overall, something like that. But 80 is pretty good, 2%, and then just 6.9 for the audience. A little better score there than in the percentage of people that liked it, but you get the idea. It's weird to me that it's a little better with critics. But it's such a strong atmosphere and mood, giving a strong sense of unease. Maybe some of the fans, in my mind, don't like the lack of a definite ending here that holds your hand, right? And you'll need to substitute your own, right? What happens here, it's left up to your imagination, right? 10 out of 10 for those reasons. Hugely influential in horror too, or other things with the blunt found footage concepts. All right, number 14 is the final showdown. Bum, bum, bum. All right, and the final showdown is appropriately in the final destination number 1 versus Let the Right One In. So, Let's get started. All right, so Final Destination 1 from 2000 is by James Wong and stars Devin Sawa, Ali Larder again, Matt and Kerr Smith, among others. Here, a group of folks miss a flight that ended in death and are now being stalked by death. It made bank too. It made a lot of money. There's an entire series of Final Destination films, and there's another one coming up here soon. And so forth. So that's great. And so forth. Its Rotten Tomatoes, though, is at 39% critics. Sorry about that. But it's a strong 68% fresh with the fans. On Metacritic, it's got a similar 39% score, but from critics, about a 67% score for people. Again, not bad. More divisive than I'd have thought, but not bad. With sensational and believable deaths to my mind, this aims for shock and blood and gore over building up stuff over time. This ending is much more of an obvious one, other than the Blair, which one of the reasons why it might be better with fans and one of the reasons why I like it more, or at least the same than critics. But it's aiming to be high art, and to my minds, misses. But I do appreciate the originality in the story. It's an unusual and brand new story like that. And it's aiming to be more. So I give it a 4 out of 10. I love lots for this reason. And then the next one, which I love lots. This foreign film was released in 2008. This is the Swedish version of the film. I saw it at my local theater in Detroit when it was released that year. It's based on a 2008 novel. This sees a young boy being bullied and then is befriended by a young girl who seems his age after he turns to for help, who's just moved in next door. It's by Thomas Alfredson and starring Kari Hildebrandt and Lena Leandersson. It's made in the world around just 11 million, not that much. But it's a massive 98% critics positive at RT and fans at 90%, and they also agree too. So I'm glad that both fans also agree. Also at Metacritic 82 and 81, so pretty close to us. They agree there both with all those 4 ratings of how good it is. I love that. There's actually see that too. So it says, I don't feel like I'm out on a windmill saying that the right one is the better film, right? And such, right? Than Final Destination or other films that are recently released and such, because everybody agrees, right? And such. Even though it didn't make a whole lot of money, it might not be the best, and it's a foreign film too. But yeah, it's a great film. So it's moody, it's atmospheric, it's films. It's an absolute classic to my mind. New classic. I love hearing everything that's happening from the setting, the pacing, and such. It's a 10 out of 10 for my folks. Alrighty, and then the moody and atmospheric films to my mind, so 3 out of 3. Alright, so now why are modern horror films moving to jump scares, blood, and gore, and sensationalism, and crazy deaths that you will go back to and say, oh, did you see that? Like over, good, strong atmospheric mood or stuff actually happening in the film that does well with that. So here are my 3 reasons for that. So reason number 1 is I think it's hard. So the first reason I feel is that building up mood over time is too hard to do well over time and consistently with the shifts, paces, atmospheres, and more. But with their affectation for easy stuff, you can just do the easy stuff and move on. Right? When the easy stuff, things like jump scares and stuff like that, and blood and gore. And my second reason is that it may not work with fans, right? You may end up with a great moody piece and such, but that doesn't mean it'll actually hit with the fans, right? It also needs to be a work on its own, right? Many horror fans may now be desensitized to the subtler mood and atmosphere, and thus that could get in the way too. I mean, if I go to my horror films and I'm a horror fan, the big stuff, and now I show up to a film that's all about mood and atmosphere that my friend says is pretty good, and it's just a slower, a subtler film, and I'm actually going to say, actually, I kind of like this. I think it's a great film, right? Even if it is a great film. And then reason number 3 is you don't need to fiscally anymore. Many horror films and franchises are budgeted differently today than they were in the past. They may only have a few $100,000 or maybe a million or two But you could easily get a few times their budget back from a horror film, because horror fans were just a feature. For example, if it was like maybe a few $100,000 or maybe a 200 or 300K, then just $1 million or $2 million would make back enough money to make a lot of money off of how much you invest. It's a big percentage increase. And if it's like $1 million or $2 million, then you could easily get like a $5 or $6 million will really make your money back and get plenty of returns, right? Not as much back, right, as previously, as before, like Final Destination or, The Haunting of Hill House had huge numbers of, The House on Haunted Hill, rather, had huge numbers on that they made in the theaters, right? And that's sort of the thing. So you're making less money today, but you're also not risking as much money, because that was like 30 million, but you got like 70 or 80, 90 million or 100 million in some cases, right? So you're spending more, but you're getting more for the hits. You're spending less, but getting less too. That makes sense. Horror fans are a reliable bunch to market to, and you wouldn't have print costs by having wide distribution out either. So those are my 3 reasons why this is harder to find good, moody, atmospheric horror with great sets and such that push a disquieting sense of unease instead of just hammering you with blood packs and sensational deaths. Hope that helps with that deep dive into my horror stuff. And so forth. Again, I'm sending this my normal Friday video and so forth as part of my normal and so forth. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below for you folks in case you're interested in discussing with me. Now remember, I'm not a trained film critic. I'm just a fan and that sort of a thing. So I'm not, or somebody who makes films for a living, unless you count this, and I don't, because this is a living. It's a pastime. It's a part-time. I don't get paid for it right now. So the idea is that, I want to keep this open for other people too, and say your opinions on these are just as valid as mine. You agree or disagree with my thoughts on modern horror films? Do you also think that what I think a good, moody, atmospheric, subtler film that builds up that sort of thing over time with great sets, great pacing, and that sort of a thing is a better film than just a faster one that just goes for blood packs and gore and sensational deaths that are crazy and unlikely and so forth, and builds up a body. So what do you think, right? Do you agree or disagree with my thoughts? I would be happy to discuss that in the comments below, right? Whatever your thoughts are. And then, tomorrow I do my serial Saturday, where I do my reviews of older serials. Tomorrow I'm doing The Romans. It's a Doctor Who serial from '65. That is a 4-parter that's set in the Roman era. It's a farce comedy and so forth. So my review of that older stuff will be there for you folks. And then also I try to do 3 reviews a week of older things in the written world, like in fantasy, horror, and science fiction. And then also on Wednesday, I do reviews of video games. I just did Might and Magic from 1998, the epic RPG, open world first person one. And then also on Monday I did a review of the first edition RPG from first edition of Dungeons & Dragons called G2, the Steading, the Frost Giant Jarl, and on Monday I'll be doing that final G3, the Hall of the Fire Giant King, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so there. So if you're interested in checking those out, please go ahead and watch some of my older stuff. I think you'll enjoy some of my older ones too, here on today's and so forth. Just watch what you want, and then share it with your friends. Do all the YouTube stuff, like hitting the like button, subscribing if you haven't already. Watch my stuff, share with other friends, hit the bell icon if you're feeling frisky. Divide my 7 videos a week. All the good stuff, right? All this older stuff tells you that's the passion of this channel. It's also where its name comes from too. It's the worst thing about new books. It's a quote by a French philosopher, Jacques Schubert, who said that the worst thing about them was that they kept us from reading the old ones. So I just definitely the smaller stuff. Love lots. And there we are. I want to thank you so very, very much for taking some time out of your day and investing and watching my videos, right? Because we all have so many things that are happening, right, in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me, that's incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it so very, very much. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.